Thank you. Uh, Thank you, members of the media and members of the new Port Authority Board. Let me start by saying I want to just thank the board, the new board, for subjecting themselves to service to this country. I know this board is coming in at a time when people might be asking them, why are they putting themselves in this situation? But I think if you love your country, you have to do what you think is right and do your utmost best. So I just want to put on the table, I thank you all for choosing to serve your country at this point in time. Members of the media, I would like to just clear up some matters that have been engaging the population over the inter-island ferry. Basically, the Tobago route of the cargo vessel, the Superfast, which will be making its final voyage on Friday. Despite the perception that some people would have put into the public domain that the government were not proactive, I wish to, as the Minister of Works and Transportation, to debunk that situation. I just want to put on the table that when I came into the ministry in November, I recognized that there was some query as to what is the role and function of the charter going forward. Was there a contract in place or was there not a contract in place? I immediately contacted the Tobago Chamber, had a meeting with them to listen to their concerns because they did raise some issues in November with me. What I found at the ministry is that there was an agreement in place with the charter. I found an opinion from Senior Counsel Claude Dembo, which basically told the ministry that there was an offer and an acceptance and that there was in place an 18-month contract, an 18-month arrangement. I called in December, I called in the charter, Intercontinental, who indicated that yes, there was an arrangement, however, it was not signed off on. But again, I just want to reiterate that what we had was an opinion that there was a contract in place. I indicated to Mr. Powell that we will meet in January, and by that time we will have a charter way forward where the contract had to be signed off. In January, Mr. Powell came in and he indicated to me that he no longer was interested in the signing off of that 18-month contract. What he wanted basically was a new contract for 5 years, an initial 3 years with the option for 1 year and an option for another year. I thought that was not acceptable because here we had a vessel that came in for 6 months to this country, and without any further tendering process being completed, this vessel got from the initial 6 months that went to 12 months. From the 12 months there was an offer for additional 6 months that eventually went to another 12 months. During this time, no tendering was able to be completed for one reason or the other. After that 2 years, there was this option for another 18 months. As Minister of Works and Transport, I felt it not fair to the population to go back to Cabinet for another 5-year contract without a tender process being completed. Because what we would have had here is a vessel in Trinidad and Tobago that came in for 6 months, remained in here for 8 years without a proper tendering procedure being able to be completed. The initial cost of this vessel was an average of $50 million per year. So if you check for 4 years, for the last 3 years, it would have been in excess of $150 million. What it meant is that the first tender that went out for 6 months was able to continue. And if we were to sign this new agreement for additional 3 plus 2 years, 5 years, this would have run the country into additional $300 million without a tendering process. The government of Trinidad and Tobago will not allow that to happen. I went to Cabinet in January, indicating basically what the provider wanted. I sought the approval from Cabinet to go out for a new tender and also for the purchase of a new vessel. In February, Cabinet approved that, and unfortunately, in March, we got a letter from the charter that they were going to pull the boat. The early stage of the discussion, we got a 30-day notice. Subsequent to that, we got a letter stating that the boat will be pulled in 14 days. Because the government was proactive in sourcing the specs for the vessel, we were able to put that spec out the next day. And on the 24th, which is next week, 1 week from now, that tender will be closed, and we expect to have a vessel for the medium term here within another 6 weeks. So whatever measures that have to be put in place now is just a temporary measure until the evaluation of the tender, which will be closed next week. Cabinet have already approved the purchase of a brand new vessel, which we expect to be here within about 30 months' time from the placing of the order. So I just wanted to clear up basically the notion that the government were not proactive and the government didn't do enough. The government did exactly what it had to do in a situation like this. When you recognize that there was going to be a challenge where the owner of the vessel, who could not get a new contract for 5 years, was threatening to pull the vessel. So I'll take questions from you on that after, but at this point in time, I just want to pass this matter to the chairman of the port to indicate to you what are the way we're going to go forward to ensure that we don't find ourselves in this position again, and two, what are the immediate plans to have the cargo from Sunday, because there's normally not a sailing on a Saturday. The Superfast will be here up to Friday, and we'll tell you what is going to happen in Trinidad and Tobago from Sunday, which will be the next sailing day. So, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I would like to indicate to the members of the press and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that this new board was installed on Tuesday, as you would recall. We immediately set about to work, and we worked assiduously in trying to ensure that come Sunday there would be a virtually seamless transition to ensure that the cargo vessel could be that we would be able to deliver from the Port Authority cargoes to and from Tobago. In that regard, we set about a process, a very rigorous process, time-consuming, and I would like to thank the management for the work that they did in basically getting information for the board and shortlisting out of 10 people, 3 providers to the board of the Port Authority. We sat on Tuesday after we were installed, those of us who were installed, and again on Thursday, and again yesterday, basically doing an assessment of the information that we were provided and to do an evaluation. The management, their committee, did an evaluation which was submitted to the tenders committee of the board. The tenders committee sat last night, and after the deliberation of the tenders committee of the board itself met and took a decision to make a recommendation to the Ministry of Works and Transport with respect to providers for the cargo transportation. In that regard, we came down to 2 preferred bidders, and at this point I would like to say that it was a very, very long, and in terms of the hours that we had to spend getting the information and doing our deliberations and scoring as appropriate in terms of the evaluation of these vessels. And to that end, we agreed to recommend to the ministry that we would have the Atlantic provider as one of the preferred vessels, and the transporter, which would provide service to and from Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the cargo operations. This is an interim situation, as the minister pointed out. The ministry and the port were very proactive in going out for tender to provide this service on a medium-term basis. So I want to reiterate that this is an interim situation, and therefore, it will probably be from anywhere between 6 weeks to 2 to 3 months, whilst we do the evaluation of the tenders that would come in on the 24th, which is on Monday, and we will go through the process of evaluating those tenders and making the necessary recommendation to the ministry with respect to who the providers would be on a more medium-term basis. I think that one of the things that I would like to say is that, this has been a very difficult situation, and it has been even more difficult for the people of Tobago, and we empathize basically with this situation. And as a board, we realize that our responsibility and our duty with the ministry is to ensure that this situation is put to bed once and for all. And to that end, we will be working assiduously to ensure that we have the necessary capability in the shortest possible time, and we will work towards providing the service that is required with respect to cargo in particular before a 3-month period is up. So on that, I would like to say that we will be meeting with the owners and the provider and the transporter, and basically ensuring and ironing out essentially everything that needs to be ironed out so that we can have a sailing on Sunday, which is the next scheduled time. I mean, in terms of what the norm is, Saturday generally is not a scheduled sailing, I am advised, and therefore the next sailing would be on Sunday, and we will be putting everything in place to ensure that that sailing happens on Sunday. Thank you.
Okay, so members of the media, I just want to put on the record that this government and this new board have a mandate to ensure that the tender process is followed through and is completed. What we have here is a vessel that came in on one tender, which was out for 6 months. So we had a proposal, a tender out for 6 months, and then the contract being signed for 12 months. Since then, 4 tenders went out. None was able to be completed. Now, when there's a tender out and it's cancelled, only one person benefits, and that is the existing provider. And this is basically what we saw happening here. The mandate that the board has is to ensure that this tender that is going to be closed on the 24th is evaluated properly, and the country gets value for money so that the citizens will know that whatever they're paying for, they're getting. There were a lot of challenges with the vessel that is out in the public domain, where we have bills running up at the Hyatt. We cannot boot the vessel, and if you went to Parliament this morning or try to get into the Hyatt, you'd realize that trucks are parked all along the side. The problem with the vessel is the infrastructure that we have. And unfortunately, that was recognized even before the vessel came to Trinidad. And that is why I presume they brought it in for 6 months. The vessel is here now for 3 years, and nothing has been done. So what we decided to do is to do this thing the proper way going forward. And the new port has that mandate to ensure that the tender process is done the proper way and comes to a close, so that we can be assured that the vessel that is doing this route now is a vessel scoped and built to suit our infrastructure. All right? Sure. 2 vessels and then I don't think.
Yeah, well, there are 2 vessels which we will be operating. One of them is a cargo vessel, and the other one is the barge, which would be basically used for, heavy equipment and construction materials, etc. Yes. There would be 2 vessels, one which would be operating on a daily basis, and the other one will be operated, which would be the barge. It would be operated with, to carry heavy equipment and as need be, and construction material and equipment.
When you say the barge that we're using is a barge that has been tested based on the evaluation, that is used for heavy equipment and construction material, that has sidewalls, is it? Up to 8 feet. So there's no, barges like these are used all parts of the world. There was a concern when I met with the chamber that if you put soft drinks and you put beer and so on the barge, the cork will be rusted. This barge is not for that. This barge is for construction material, meaning sand, gravel, cement, blocks, or if somebody has some cranes or anything to take to Tobago, this is what the barge is for. The other vessel, if I'm correct, is for perishable goods and any item that is not
Container cargo.
Yes, container cargo and things like that. Again, we just want to reiterate, this is basically an interim measure.
Yeah.
The first option we had was to use the 2 fast ferries, the passenger. But at this point in time, there's no need for that. And this is what I tried to tell. I told the chamber that we are evaluating the options as we go along. We have reached the stage now where we do not have to put cargo on the fast ferries.
The barge is in Trinidad at this time, which is the transporter, and the MV provider is on its way back to Trinidad. It will be here on Friday. It went up to St. Martin to deliver silica sand to St. Martin, and it will be back on Friday morning and be ready for sailing on Sunday. Essentially, the cost basically would be in the region of $14,500 a day for the provider, and another $8,000, between $8,000 and $10,000 for the barge per day. Yes, per day. US dollars. US dollars. Well, we basically expect that we will be using the provider probably it's for 1 month in the first instance, with an option for 2 to 3 months if needed. And for the barge, it would be in the vicinity of a month, with an option for another month.
All right, let me tell you, I guess that the question that you asked about this, what we would have done about 3 weeks ago is to put the spec out for the size of vessel, the berth, and the capacity that we're looking for. That went out to, I think it's 11 brokers, and based on what comes in, then we will be able to evaluate and the price. Once the tender is closed on the 24th, then we will know exactly what have been submitted. What would have gone out is a spec as to basically the size of the vessel that you're looking for. So you will not know what is coming in until the tender is closed. Sorry? Well, yeah, if the tender is closed by the 24th, we expect to have the vessel here and operationalized 6 weeks after that. That's the time frame that we're working with. So we're looking at 6 weeks from the 24th. Until a vessel is purchased. The board has a mandate with the cabinet approval already in hand to spec a vessel that we can place an order for to have the vessel here within about 30 months. Because that's about the time it takes to build a vessel. Well, again, we're jumping the gun. Once they do the spec, you send this out to different shipbuilders, and then you get quotations. Yeah, the boat is about
This one,
what?
7.5.
Yeah.
The sailing time, the vessel, which will be the provider, is between 7 and 8 hours. And the barge is 10 hours.
It should be more.
Oh yes, it actually it would be more than the cargo that is being transported now. There is some redundancy combined, yes.
No. Ideally, you would want to have your delivery to Tobago in the shortest possible time, but because the barge is for construction material is not perishable goods. So what it means is that we'd have to just schedule the shipment to ensure that there's no shortage in Tobago. Construction material is not something that as you take it off the boat, you take it straight to a shelf in a supermarket or a store. We're talking about sand, gravel, blocks, steel, things like that. So a lot of the items that people feel 7 hours is too long and 10 hours is too long, a lot of these items actually stay on the ocean, coming from China, coming from wherever, for 3 months and 21 days. But there's this impression that once it lands in Trinidad, it must be in Tobago within 3 hours. Now, perishable items, yes, and this is why we have the boat for that vessel to take that. The construction material will not spoil, it will not decay, it wouldn't affect anything if it takes 10 hours. And I can tell you, I think based on the economic circumstances that the country finds itself into, we may have to look in terms of how do we get sea transportation at a cheaper cost. And speed means money.
Yes.
Speed means money. So it is something that we have to look at and see, maybe if we have to carry sand, gravel, and blocks and spend 4 hours longer, but it's 50% cheaper in terms of transportation, whether the country wants to look at that. Yeah. I think if my figures are correct, the Superfast total cost was about $70 million, meaning the charter and everything, and I think the revenue was just about 15 million. My figures could be a little off, but the government actually subsidized this by a couple of 100%. Well, you see, it's nice to say to get the private sector involved, but is the private sector going to subsidize this by 400%? The answer is no. Well, again, the private sector will not get involved in anything that they're not making money out of. And clearly, if we go to charge the real cost of the transportation, then nobody would be able to afford goods and service in Tobago. So the government does have a responsibility, but the government has to make sure that it is just not throwing away money where areas that you can save. There's no point in you putting sand, gravel, blocks, and cement on a air-conditioned boat to go to Tobago that is costing you 300% more than putting it on a barge, and it just take a couple hours to get there. So the government has to look now in terms of how you get value for money. And I'm not saying that, you know, Tobago has to wait for anything, but we just have to make sure that we're doing the right thing going forward, because we really want to solve this problem once and for all. I think it's 4.5 hours.
5 hours.
It's an average of 5 hours as compared to 7 or 7.5, 8 hours. But remember, this is an interim. And basically, we have to work with what is on the table. What the government has committed to do is to ensure that there's no disruption in the service. It is going to cost us a little more, because what we're dealing with here is a short-term measure. And in the maritime industry, once you go short-term, once you go daily rate, you pay a lot more than a long-term. And that is why the government is looking after leasing a vessel for a 3-year period. So that will bring the cost down. Well, again, that's why I opened my statement by saying I have not seen a document that says month to month. What I have seen is an opinion by senior counsel, it's Claude Dembo, that says that there was an offer made by the Port Authority to the Intercontinental. And I've seen a letter where Intercontinental accepted the offer and asked for a 3-month payment. I have a note here where the former permanent secretary approved that payment to the port. And based on the correspondence, senior counsel Denbo indicated that there was an arrangement in place. So where the month-to-month is coming from, I have no information on that month-to-month. It's an arguable position. What is strange is that in December, Intercontinental were talking about just signing off on that arrangement. But in January, they no longer were interested in that, and they were no longer interested in going out for tender. What they were saying is that what we want right now is a 3-year plus 2-year contract, or else the owners will pull the boat. That contract would have been close to $300 million. And I don't think any government should sign a sole select contract for $300 million without having to go out there and see what the market is offering. That time period would have taken us to the end of August, which would have given the government enough time, end of October, which would have given the government enough time to spec the vehicle, go out with that vessel for tender, evaluate the tender process, and have a vessel here at least a month or 2 before the contract would have ended. What has happened here is that the provider decided to pull the vessel. The government did not send the vessel out, contrary to what some of the detractors are saying. The government did not tell Intercontinental, come and take up your vessel and go. Intercontinental sent a letter stating that they are going to pull the vessel on so and so date. That has to go to the Attorney General to see whether there was a breach of any agreement based on the advice of senior counsel on this matter. Well, no, we would have sent the files, and we are still in the process of sending files to him. And as the Ministry of Works, that's as much as we will do. Send the files, the Attorney General will review the file and make a finding going forward on it.
Is there any report at the ministry that points to the vessel as being the most suitable?
Well,
The ministry.
yes, what I have seen is a report on the strengths and the weaknesses that basically showed 5 weaknesses and 2 strengths. However, I did see a report that said yes, that the vessel is most suited. That to me is another question that has to be answered. And when we look at the timelines as to the procurement, you see, there's a lot of questions to be answered as to when this tender went out for 6 months, when a decision was taken to use the vessel, when the cabinet decided that they would have signed off on it. The timelines in this whole scenario doesn't make sense. And a key point here is that we have paid an attorney to find a vessel in the billing. That attorney was also a tenderer, did not submit a tender but was invited to tender. What we ended up, after paying the attorney to find a vessel, we ended up with a broker who went and chartered a vessel and came back and chartered the vessel to us. So I don't know really and truly if that is a normal situation where you'd pay an attorney to find a vessel, the vessel will then find a broker, the broker will then charter the vessel and come and charter it back to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think this is where the problem we face with now, where the arrangement with the charterer and the owner of the vessel, we have to abide by that here, because this vessel was rented in Gibraltar. The 30 days notice, basically the vessel had to go back, the charterer had to carry it back to the owner. We thought we would have gotten the 30 days. No, the 30 days notice wasn't for us and the vessel leaving here in 30 days. The vessel had to reach back in Gibraltar because there were so many people along the line that as the government of Trinidad and Tobago, you now just have to throw your arms in the air and say, who we really rent this vessel from? What we have is somebody sending a bill for finding the vessel, then we're dealing with a broker who chartered the vessel from somebody, and we have a charter arrangement with that person. And that is the whole convolution of this whole scenario here. And this is why the entire file goes to the Attorney General, and he will determine whether this is right or this is not right. Well, I can tell you, if we had that port in Togo, the time from Trinidad to Tobago would have been half. So, I mean, what it shows is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago is definitely going to put things in place to ensure that anybody who wants to go to Tobago or come from Tobago will not have to be faced again with this situation. We have to fix this problem once and for all. It's not about throwing blame anymore. We have a government who have been elected to fix all the problems that can be fixed. And the Tobago Sea Bridge and the Air Bridge is one of the major problems that we have, and we intend to fix it once and for all. For too long, Tobagonians have been suffering because of this air bridge, and we need to fix it once and for all.
We have time for just 2 more questions.
Members of the media, I get about 1 million calls a day over the super fast, you know, so here's the opportunity. That's it. Sure. Well, the Attorney General will have to look in terms of whether there was a breach by the provider. Because, I mean, I came in November, as I said, and I saw an opinion from a senior counsel that there is an agreement. I've seen where the ministry have allocated the funding all the way up to the end of October. I have seen a document where the provider have accepted the terms and conditions offered to him. And everything was going on until we decided that we just got a 14-day notice that the vessel will be withdrawn. The government did not say, we want this vessel out of here. The government went about understanding that, look, we have a vessel until a certain time. Let us start the procurement for a replacement vessel. Immediately upon doing that in February, we heard about the vessel being reflagged, and then we got that, look, the vessel is going to be pulled. So this is the situation the government finds itself in, and the government have decided that our backs will not go against the wall, we are going to do what we have to do. I just want to point out, this is not the first scenario where the government found itself in. In 2015, this same scenario occurred, where the vessel got an additional 6-month contract from the previous government and the previous board. And there's a letter indicating that the provider decided, I am not going to take that 6 months. I want a year. And the then government caved in and said, okay, we will give you a year, without going back out for tender. That additional year cost the country additional 60 or 70 odd million dollars. This vessel have gotten 4 extensions with no tendering process being able to complete. No fault of the vessel owner, but clearly there are some elements who would have benefited from the vessel remaining. And I don't want, as the port would normally use the word human interference, I don't want to use that word, but I'm very suspicious that 4 tenders could go out and none could be completed. This board has a mandate to complete this tender process to ensure that a proper tendering process takes place. The 60 million is TT, because, yeah. But if a 5-year contract was signed, that could have run us close to $300 million TT. And that process would have been won without a tendering.
Trinidad